What's up guys, Mark here. In today's video, I want to share 4 menu settings that have added value to my workflow with the Sony FX3 and why I think you should consider using them or at least be aware of them. Okay, so without wasting your time or any extra jibber jabber,
quit your jibber jabber.
Let's get right into the video. So number 1, the rule of thirds. The rule of thirds is a composition guideline that places your subject in the left or right of the image, leaving the other 2/3 open. Now, so why is this setting important? Even though it's called a rule, it can be broken, so it should be considered best practice. At a high level, the idea is just to balance your main subject with empty space in your shot to draw the viewer's eyes. The Sony FX3 gives us 2 options to view the rule of thirds. One is through grid lines and the other is via marker display. All right, so let's try something a little different. We're gonna take a quick trip outside. I'm gonna try a few example shots and hopefully I don't mess this up. And then we'll come right back inside and I'll show you how to set this up in camera. All right, let's give it a go. We're outside of my smoke hole, out in the wild in nature. I'm gonna try to give you guys some examples of the rule of thirds using guide frames with the Sony FX3. All right, so we're back. After looking at the footage, I think I could have did a better job, but practice makes perfect. And sometimes you have to fail yourself forward till you get it right. Okay, so let's jump into camera's menu and get this set up. Select menu, shooting display. Go down to number 10, grid line display. Toggle to on. For the grid line type, select rule of thirds. Bam, now look at that. Not too shabby, but hey, we got another option available to us called marker display. So let's go ahead and set that up too as well. Oh, I almost forgot. To enable marker display, you have to disable grid lines. You cannot have them both enabled at the same time. Okay, to enable marker display, select menu, shooting, marker display. Marker display, toggle to on, and make sure to select guide toggle to on. Okay, so now you should have a super thick, easy to read rule of thirds grid lines on the display for people that wear glasses like me. Number 2, setting the focal length when you're using vintage or manual lenses. If you have your camera mounted on a tripod 100% of the time and have no desire to capture handheld footage with old school lenses, feel free to skip to number 3. But if you do, this one's important. The lens focal length is automatically set for us when using Sony native glass or third-party lenses with autofocus. So why is this setting important? Here's why. Sony clearly states that if the camera cannot obtain focal length information, steady shot functionality does not work correctly. What is steady shot, you ask? It's your IBIS, or what the camera does to help remediate camera shape. The Sony FX3 has 5-axis stabilization, and without going into the geeky bits, it needs that focal length to properly stabilize your footage. So here's how to enable it. Select the menu button, shooting, go down to number 8, image stabilization, focal length. If the lens is talking to the camera, it'll be grayed out and you don't need to do anything else. If the lens is not talking to the camera, it will allow you to select a focal length between 8mm and 1000mm. It defaults to 8mm, which is crazy. 8mm is super wide. That's like the point of view of a housefly. I don't know why. Okay, moving on. Number 3, using the delete button to access the camera's menu or guide. This tip is helpful because the Sony FX3's manual is 524 pages thick. Who's going to read that? I'm not, and you're probably not either. So if you find yourself digging around through the camera's menu and you see a setting that you don't understand what it does and don't have access to the physical menu, just hit the delete button and it'll give you a quick snippet of what the setting actually does. All right, last one, number 4, clean your sensor and check it for dust bunnies. Dust, for some oddball reason, seems to always show up on your sensor at the wrong freaking time. In the process of changing lenses, it's inevitable. Dust is going to get in there. Just the other day, I was working on a product shot. I noticed this weird dark spot just floating across the image. Not this weird, but weird. I managed to hide the spot with some speed ramp trickery and motion blur, but that freaking spot really pissed me off. Now you can duplicate the clip and use the draw mask to fix it in post, but depending on how much movement you have in the shot, it can be a pain in the tail to try to fix. Now here's a real quick zero-touch way to clean your sensor that Sony actually recommends. The first thing you want to do is at least make sure that your battery is 50% charged. Go into the menu, go down to setup option, sensor cleaning, press enter. Once that's done, turn off the camera. Hold the camera body with the sensor facing down. I don't want to state the obvious, but gravity helps us here. Now remove the lens or the lens mount cap. Use a quality camera dust blower to gently shoot puffs of air into the camera body. Now replace the lens or the lens cap. Now you're done. All right, guys. So in summary, in today's video, we went over 4 basic settings for the Sony FX3 that you can possibly use or at least be aware of that can help you with your workflow. Number 1, the rule of thirds. When you are the chief cook and bottle washer, you might forget about composition while shooting. Having the grid lines or marker display front and center will help remind you to check your composition. Number 2, setting the lens focal length to assist steady shot. Setting the focal length for the steady shot inside helps give the FX3 the necessary data it needs to properly use the power of its 5-axis stabilization. We can fix shaky footage in post, but I've personally found that it's easier if you can fix it in camera, it's better. Number 3, the delete button is a real quick way to access the camera's manual for those of us that are too busy or too lazy to read it. Number 4, sensor cleaning. Sensor cleaning was actually automatic on my old school Canon camera, and it did it when I turned it on and off. But with the Sony FX3, you have to manually start the process. This is not a big deal, but since there's not a warning or maintenance schedule, it's a good idea to check and clean it when it needs it, so you don't have dust bunnies showing up in your footage like I did. All right, guys, I think that covers everything for today. And if you already knew this, great. But if you didn't, now you know. And guess what? Knowing is half the battle. G.I. freaking Joe.